From NBC News, this is Today with Hoda and Jenna Bush-Hager from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
The world has seen an overwhelming amount of grief and sadness these past few months, and most recently due to the death of George Floyd, whose funeral happens to be today.
Not to mention the families of the 110,000 people who lost their lives to COVID, many never even having the chance to say goodbye.
So here's our question. How can we learn to cope with the pain? Leslie Gray Streeter wrote the book Black Widow after the death of her husband. And David Kessler, he's the author of Finding Meaning, the sixth stage of grief. Thank you guys both for joining us. First of all, I feel like the whole country is in this kind of we're in this strange place. We're grieving, but at the same time, you almost feel like there's some kind of revolution bubbling up. And let's just talk about that. How do you deal with grief during these times?
Well, I'll go. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's important that we, recognize and acknowledge and accept the reality of the sadness, the frustration, the pain, the unattended grief that's there, and name it. And then decide, if we can accept it, how can we take action in the honor of all those who have died and in honor of George Floyd?
Leslie.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Leslie.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that if we remember the difference between grief and mourning, grief is what we feel. It's the inward, our sadness. And the mourning is what we've been missing, unfortunately, because of COVID. It's the funerals. It's the sitting Shiva. It's the bringing chicken to your mama's house, that kind of thing. And I think that we've found ways, because humans are resilient, of doing it, whether it's Zoom recollections or if we're not able to have in-person memorials, or some people using their Facebook pages as like a guest book. I have friends who've posted pictures of their late uncles back in the 50s when they were in their uniforms and they look really fly, or their aunts going disco dancing, and just telling the story of who those people were. I have a friend who's a 9/11 widow who said that it pained her that her fiance, who died on 9/11, was not able to make new memories. But when she told stories about him, people learned about him through those memories. And I've heard so many people do that during that time we were most disconnected.
So, Leslie, you lost your husband, and I read a little bit of your book this morning. And so for people that are feeling pain, either because they've lost somebody to COVID or just the general pain of this time, witnessing the death of George Floyd, can you best help them deal with this grief and this pain and this anger and everything that comes with it?
I agree with what David said, is that you have to say that that's what you're feeling. I think a lot of times we think we're going to be stoic and we don't know what to say, so we don't say anything, or we think we have to be strong right now because things seem to be falling apart. And I think it's okay to say that you need other people. It's okay to talk to the people that you're closest to, even if you can't see them in person, and say, this is how I am, this is how I'm feeling. And for also people to check in. If you know your friends are struggling, you don't have to get all deep with it, because maybe sometimes they don't want to, but just to say, how are you today? And whether they want to talk about the pain of racism, whether they want to talk about their loved ones, whether they want to talk about what happened on America's Got Talent yesterday, whatever it is that they're feeling in that moment, let them be who they are at that moment, and that might lead to something deeper, and maybe that's what they needed.
That's beautiful. Sometimes just sitting with someone and asking them. David, we talked about how it's hard to heal when you still have an open wound, and I feel like a lot of people are trying to race to the healing process before anything has been resolved. What do you have to say about that concept?
Well, we can't heal what we don't feel. And grief must be witnessed. And there's been so much unattended grief that has been felt for so long. And what's changed is we now have a visual of what's been going on for far too long. We have the visual of the horrific death of George Floyd. And what we don't have is a visual of those over 100,000 people who have died from the virus. Think about this. That would be like a Southwest Airlines, 724 Southwest planes going down in the last 2 months. That would be a plane crashing every 2 hours, and we don't see it, so we're not finding the rituals. If we had funerals it would change everything. But all that has been missed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been. And I think what you said, Leslie, about still making those rituals in this time can provide a lot of hope.
I think it can too, because what I like to do, like for instance, I have a 6-year-old son, and he hasn't been in school since March. So he's grieving, that loss. So we can we start from there about why haven't we been able to go to school, and what does that mean, and what is the virus? And, he knows that I wrote a book about his dad, and about grief. So you can sort of like start where you are and make the things that you would have been rituals, like going to school, talking to friends, make something meaningful from that for him and for kids. I think it made a difference for us.
Leslie, such great advice. Don't forget to pick up Leslie's book, Black Widow, David's book, Finding Meaning. You can get them both at today.com/shop. Guys, thank you so much. We'll be back right after this.
Thanks, guys.